All right, want to welcome everyone. It's class of Noahide Laws. Again, want to welcome everyone. It's class of Noahide Laws. Spoke last few weeks about Aver Min Achai, eating a limb from a live animal. So we spoke different applications about that last week. So here's going to be the last section. We're going to speak about dietary laws. And we're going to discuss a number of things that really don't apply to Noahides, right? The question is, why are we going to discuss it here? It's a good question. But we're going to discuss a number of things that do apply, right? We're going to see things that don't apply. We'll see the things that do apply and why. It's very important to understand there's a relationship, right? There's a relationship between Jews and non-Jews. The Jews have a tremendous relationship to food. A lot of things revolve around food, as part of the holidays. Shabbos, you have 3 meals. You have to make, 100 blessings during the day. Right on Shabbos, so you eat some sweets, you eat some other things, etc. So a lot of things have to do with food. But there's a relationship, right? And there's an affected relationship between Jews and non-Jews. So what does food do in general besides satiate, get us to put on extra weight, and all that is build social bonds. That's what it does, build relationships. The Jewish dietary laws, they present all kinds of challenges. They're challenges for Jews, challenges for non-Jews, but it's not just about what's kosher, what's not kosher, right? It's not just about ingredients, right? A lot of these forbidden things that we're going to see, what does it have to do with? It has to do with social interaction. And no offense, Jews shouldn't be interacting in general with non-Jews because it leads to assimilation, can lead to intermarriage. So we're going to see what the boundaries of these relationships are. And you have to understand why these restrictions, are so strict over here. Right? That, either group doesn't offend one another. So we want to make sure there's no misunderstanding. Right? But bottom line, when we see a lot of these things, is the fact that there are tremendous stringencies because we do not in any way, shape, or form, in general, to have too much social interaction. That we don't want. Because we know what social interaction can do. So, there are 2 reasons. Motivated by 2 different concerns. Some are due to the possibility that I'm worried about non-kosher ingredients. Non-kosher material. Other laws established because we want, as we mentioned, we want to limit social contact between Jews and non-Jews. What's the reason? We don't want intermarriage. Got big problems with intermarriage today. Probably the single biggest problem that's facing the Jewish people today, right? Assimilation, intermarriage. So it's a very severe prohibition. Right? And it's got very severe repercussions. Because if you would ask most affiliated Jews today, affiliated, non-affiliated, not going to care. But if you would ask most affiliated Jews, yes or no, right? Multiple choice. Yes or no. Is a Jew allowed to marry a non-Jew according to the Bible? Now, if they're affiliated with a synagogue, they should say no. There might be a but. Maybe it's only for that generation. Maybe this, maybe that. Right? But they'll say you're not allowed to intermarry. Now, secular Jews that are not affiliated with the synagogue, they'll say, I don't care what the Bible says. I'm going to do what I want. And even the Bible says it's forbidden, so what? I don't know about the Bible anyway, so you can say whatever it wants. But there are severe prohibitions. There are let's say better, there are severe repercussions of such a thing. And the reason is very simple, because once a person does that, it's like they lose their status as a Jew in many ways. Like someone who desecrates Shabbos on public, whether they know, whether they don't know. They grew up as a potato farmer in Idaho, right? No offense. Anyone's a potato farmer, grew up in Idaho. They don't know anything. Can't read olive pays, never learned. But they desecrate Shabbos, they can be liable for a death penalty, right? If there was a temple in Jerusalem, if there was a Sanhedrin, if there was a Jewish Supreme Court. And they also get spiritually cut off. You're going to say, but they don't know anything. They never learned. You're right. But see, ignorance isn't bliss over here. They make a blessing, you can't answer amen to their blessing. You can't call them to the Torah, right? Call them to the Torah, they make a blessing. Nashir bachar banu mikol hamim, that they are chosen from amongst the nations. If you intermarry, you can't make that blessing. The blessing in vain, right? There are many repercussions, which we're going to see. So what are the modern applications? Now, it could be a lot of the reasons behind the prohibitions don't apply. They definitely don't apply today. Nonetheless, we hold that these things are forbidden. Right? There's a Torah law. It's called a davar shebeminyan. What teaches us what? Teaches that ancient courts cannot be overturned by later courts, unless they're equal in number and their eminence to the original court, the greater. So you need a, at least an equal number in the courts. It has to be greater. It has to be greater in knowledge. Right? So we don't have that today. So therefore, the prohibitions stand. Can't override them. So we're going to go through a number there, and you'll see why they don't apply per se, but we still keep them. Again, most of these apply to Jews, not to non-Jews. First thing is stam yain. Stam yain. Wine. Now, wine that's owned or made by a non-Jew. Jews are not allowed to drink. Even if all the ingredients, all the utensils, all things being equal, used in the process to manufacture it are kosher. Or any wine or grape juice that's been touched, moved, or poured by a non-Jew. What I'm going to call in my language, as Coffman would say, this is called spiritual cooties in a certain way. Why is there a decree? There's a decree out of concern that what? That the intent of the non-Jew, when he handled the wine, what did he do? Maybe he had thoughts for idolatry. And if that's the case and the wine's being used for idolatry, Jew can't drink it. Wine is biblically prohibited. For a Jew, because it's idolatry. It's used for idolatry. Anything used for idolatry, Jew can't use. Forbidden. Why? Because idolatry is Isser Bahana. It's forbidden to get any benefit. Any benefit at all. Now, today, the law is going to apply slightly different than it did in ancient times. Why? Because idolatry today is different. Different in a number of ways. Nonetheless, there's still application to anything that is grape juice, anything made out of grapes, right? Grape juice, wine, or grape derivatives. Because we said before, it's a davar shebeminyan, can't be overthrown. We don't have a basin that's greater. You can't overthrow it over here. So therefore, this is going to apply even if the wine's touched by Noahides. Even those in the process of conversion. Now you're going to tell me, but even if they touch it, it's not all wine we're talking about, we'll see. But even if they touch it, they're not using it for idolatry. By definition, they're Noahides. They're JIT, my language, Jew in training. So therefore, even if they're a Jew in training, are they Jewish? No. They're still a non-Jew. People will tell me, I hear, quite often, I don't need to go through the conversion process. I'm a Jew at heart. Well, that's beautiful. You know what that means? Goose egg. Did you convert? No. But I'm more Jewish than most Jews. Okay. So what? So even if that's true, even if I would agree, so doesn't change anything. So therefore, non-Jew, Noahide, doesn't matter, whatever they call themselves, they touch the wine, Jew can't drink it, even if they're not idolaters. So what are we talking about over here? We're talking about this prohibition which does not apply to wine or grape juice that has been boiled or cooked. Why? What does it have to do? Why? What does it have to do with anything? Because ancient forms of idolatry motivated by the original prohibition do not consider cooked wine fit for religious use. In other words, even if they're going to use wine or grape juice for a libation, put it on their altar, whatever they're going to use it for, they would never do it. Right? If it's cooked, not good enough. Not good enough for their God. They wouldn't do it. So therefore, if you see the bottle of wine that says mevushel, means it's cooked or pasteurized, that means non-Jew can open the bottle, not a problem. We're only talking about where the bottle's open, by the way. If the bottle's open, the non-Jew moved, it's one thing. If the bottle's closed, not a problem. But if the bottle's open and it's boiled or cooked, that doesn't come under the prohibition. So if you're at a gathering of Jews which wine is served, you got to make sure the wine is mevushel. It's cooked before handling. If it's not cooked, like a lot of semi-dry or dry wines, then it should not be handled. Non-Jews should not handle it. They should have someone to pour for them if they want. Similarly, bringing wine to a dinner, let's say, you come to somebody, you go to a dinner, so only give wine that is mevushel, right? That is pasteurized or cooked, and it's usually indicated on the label, usually right near where it says it's kosher, right? Here's a picture, right? It says kosher Passover. There's an OU, Union of Orthodox Rabbis, and then it says kosher mevushel. Mevushel means it's cooked, right? 100% cooked. So if it's corked and sealed, we mentioned, not a problem. Definitely not a problem. Right? Where's the problem? When it's opened. Now, that's by wine. Now, what about chalvakum, gavinazakum, which is milk and cheese? Do we have a similar prohibition? So milk and cheese processed by non-Jews, again, even if all the ingredients are kosher, prohibited for Jews. Why? Worried about non-kosher material may have been mixed into the milk or the cheese. In order for non-Jewish milk or cheese to be kosher, a Jew had to be there watching the milking process. Right? He had to be there while the cheese was being made or the milk was milked. Make sure nothing else was added. Now again, this doesn't really have any impact too much on regular Jewish, non-Jewish interaction. Nonetheless, good thing to know. Good thing to know. So there's another thing over here. We got pasakum, by baked goods, baked bread, by a non-Jew for Jewish consumption. Even if all the ingredients in the oven are kosher, free was made again. Why? We're limiting social interaction between Jews and non-Jews. So if it's baked for commercial purposes, meaning for sale, not for consumption, different issue. May be eaten by a Jew, not subject to the prohibition, unless the non-Jew cooked it from beginning to end. The Jew didn't have any process. He didn't do anything to help the process of cooking, which we're going to speak about in the next thing about bishul akum and non-Jewish cooking. But in this case, a Jew cannot eat cookies also baked by a non-Jewish friend, but a Jew can purchase the exact same item in a grocery store. It's a different issue. If it's kosher, made by a Jew, even if it's cooked by a non-Jew, but a Jew did something in the process, turned on the oven, stirred it, mixed it, whatever. Then we get out of the problem with bishul akum, which is going to be the next topic. Anything cooked by a non-Jew. See, it's interesting. Right? It's prohibited for Jewish consumption. Now, I get this question a lot. A JIT, a Jew in training, wants to kasher their pots, pans, silverware, right? They want to kasher them, bring them to the mikveh, right, etc. So what's the problem? So if they cook anything in it, you'll tell me a Jew can't eat it, right? What about themselves? Are they allowed to eat it themselves? Right? They're allowed to eat it themselves. They can't give it to a Jew, right? If a Jew didn't have anything to do in the process. But technically speaking, the rabbis tell us if a non-Jew cooks up something, and a secular Jew for that matter, who desecrates Shabbos on purpose, if they cook something in a pot and pan and everything's totally kosher, can't eat it. Jew can't eat it. Right? And so for a non-Jew, they cook it up in their own pan, becomes non-kosher automatically. They can eat it. They can't give it to a Jew to eat. So this again, even if all the ingredients and the utensils are kosher, Jew can't eat it. But only applies to foods. All right, so we want to make clear what types of foods. Foods that have a certain degree of significance. Now, someone's going to ask the $1.5 million question, what does that mean? What is considered significant? So this is not so simple. Not always a matter of consensus. Now, there are certain staple foods. Let's say coffee or tea. Certain basic snacks, potato chips, according to some, prepared by a non-Jew, may be eaten by a Jew. Not everyone agrees, by the way, by coffee and tea. But in general, if a non-Jew makes these things, should be okay to eat, right? According to some opinions. But almost anything else that's considered prohibited for Jewish consumption, anything that is really considered significant, right? What are we talking about significant? Chicken, meat, potatoes in general, side dishes, rice, cakes. Any of these things that be made by a non-Jew, if a Jew has nothing to do with the preparation, then he can't drink, then he can't eat it. So the utensils also used by the non-Jew, guess what? They're also making non-kosher. Prohibited for use by a Jew. But if the food is later cooked by a Jew, so let's say, okay, these utensils are now forbidden. Let's say the Jew now cooks in it. Also forbidden. Right? It's also forbidden. And it can happen 100 times, 1,000 times. Right? It doesn't matter. You cook it, it's a forbidden pot. Everything you cook in it's forbidden. Now, this makes it pretty much almost impossible for a Jew ever to eat food of any kind prepared in the home of a non-Jew. If it's cooked, baked, fried, roasted, whatever it is, cooked has many definitions. But anything that you do, you cook it, you roast it, you boil it, it's going to be forbidden. And that was the intent over here. Now, there's one exception. There's one exception over here. And that is if a Jew has minimal participation in the cooking. Ashkenazim and Sephardim have different understandings of what that means. Now, for us, for Ashkenazim, we'll say like this. If it's something that's cooked from beginning to end, hamburger, let's say, chicken, whatever it is, a non-Jew, turn on the oven, mix the, put whatever sauce on the chicken, mix it all up, put the chicken in the oven, the end of the day, cooks totally, that's forbidden. The oven's not kosher, chicken's not kosher, the whole thing, got to be kosher. Now, what would happen if in the process, the Jew turns on the oven high enough to cook, not just he turns it on, but it's getting high enough to be able to cook it, right? More than 104 degrees Fahrenheit at least. It's going to be, hot enough to cook. Or a Jew stirred it up or something like that, then a Jew could eat it. But if it was done beginning to end of the process, the non-Jew did everything from beginning to end, forbidden. But there's another issue. What if you bought something, let's say store-bought? Go to a place, let's say you live in a place, you live in a certain place where you get kosher prepared food. Okay. You live in Chicago, you live in New York, New Jersey, wherever. You get kosher prepared food. Now, when that Jew or non-Jew, secular Jew, heats that up, Does a Jew have to have any participation in it? No. Why not? Very simple. Because even though you're going to tell me they did it from beginning to end, it's already cooked. If it's already cooked, I didn't do anything wrong over here. The non-Jew and the secular Jew. Why not? Because you're reheating. Reheating is not cooking. If you're telling me part of it wasn't cooked, they finished the cooking, maybe a different issue. Or they cooked from beginning to end. The Jew didn't have any, didn't do anything over here. He didn't participate in the process, right? One opinion of the Gemara is someone's cooking burgers or something on the stove, right? Whatever, and you flip the burger. Well, flipping the burger, what does that do? It helps it cook better, right? That's considered enough. Others say they can do something a little more significant, maybe not. But in this case, just turning the oven on is not good enough. You have to turn it on high enough that it's going to cook. But something that's already cooked, I don't have the prohibition. Right? I'm just reheating. Reheating is not cooking. Reheating is exactly what it sounds like. Reheating. Now, there's another prohibition over here. Right? Another prohibition a lot of people don't necessarily aware of. Social drinking. What we call sheikher aku. Now, Jews are not permitted to drink socially with non-Jews. Now, what does that mean? It means, why are you gathering in that place? You go to a bar. What do you do in a bar? You drink. What you normally do. Maybe shoot pool. I don't know. Whatever. You drink. That's what you do. That's socializing drinking. Right? That's socialized drinking here. That you're not allowed to do. What about situations where there's a gathering? And the primary purpose, there's a primary purpose for that gathering. But it just so happens to serving alcohol also. For example, a Jew attends a conference. He has to go to this conference for work. His co-workers. And he happens to be served. Or there's an open bar. Is a Jew allowed to drink there? Be allowed to. Why? Because the purpose of getting together, what they're doing is for business. If it's for business in general, and we'll speak more specifically in a second. In general, what does that mean? That's the purpose, not there to socialize. Right? But it could be. They might be serving drinks. You're allowed to have a drink. But that's only in the case if it's infrequent. If the event or circumstance, occur regularly, Jews not allowed to drink. For example, company gets together once a week to discuss business. They have alcohol there. That's the problem. Right? You wouldn't be allowed to drink. Now, what about, let's say, you have a December 25th party. Before December 25th. You have to be there. Right? The Jew has to be there. You have to show your face. You have no choice. So you're going to say, well, maybe it's not about, maybe it is a little bit about socializing over here. There will be drinks. But what's the problem? It's a December 25th party. So that goes against everything we stand for. Right? That, December 25th is all made up religion. We spoke about that. Chidushei das. But over here, it's a get-together. It's a get-together, but you have to show your face. I know someone told me a story years ago. They had a brother that, had to go to these things. Everybody knew he went there. What did he have to drink? Soda. He had Coke. Right? That's what he would drink. He would stay there, say hello to people, whoever he had to say hello to, get in and out as quick as possible. Right? But this is the reality in the workforce. If these meetings are infrequent, different issue. Something like that is a totally different issue because it has to do with idolatry. Right? Essentially. But in this case, you have a meeting every week. They're going to be serving alcohol. Yeah. You got a problem. Can't drink. Right? 100%. If it's something infrequent, so it can be more lenient. Because, it's very infrequent over here. Similarly, a Jew cannot accept an invitation from a non-Jew. Come over and have a beer. Let's hang out together. Not interested. Right? Can't do it. But if the Jew in your home for some other reason, let's say it's business, someone's helping you move, whatever, you can offer. You can accept this offer. because that's infrequent. That's not something that, you can sit down, you can be buddy-buddy, this, that. No, it's a certain situation. Therefore, it'd be forbidden to tell all these secular Jews this or whatever, right? Especially college students. Tell them this, or young adults, we'll call them. Tell them they can't go to a pub. They can't go to a bar, as we would say in Boston. Can't go to a bar. What's a bar, just in case you're not aware? It's an environment designed for social drinking. Ha ha. That's being nice, right? Maybe way back when, I don't know. That's what people did. What do you go to a bar for? To socialize, right? If you're a guy, you're there to pick up women. That's what you're doing at a bar. There's a woman there necessarily there to pick up a guy. I don't know, maybe. Depends how much you drink. Right? But a lot of times, just kind of throw this out there, because I grew up like everybody else. When do things happen? Between a man and a woman, you go out. When can things spill over? When you drink. Why when you drink? No inhibitions. I'm not saying you're plastered. You don't have any inhibitions. Things you wouldn't normally say or do, now that you're a little bit under the influence, stuff happens. Right? So, as I remember, hearing this many times, even when I was in college. How's the person meet someone else in a bar? That's where you meet. That's where other people meet. You don't get set up on blind dates. You meet. You're out there. Totally 100% forbidden. 100% forbidden. In a place where it's designed for social drinking. And that is definition. First, second, third, fifth definition of Webster. That is a pub. That's what it is. Now, according to some authorities, this law does not apply to alcohol, but all social beverages. Ooh, that's an even bigger stringency. You want to talk about you go to a pub, I can understand, because it's alcohol. We know what alcohol does, right? You don't want to be chummy with non-Jews. I get it. But let's say you go to a place, you don't go to a bar. You go somewhere else, and you're socially drinking soda. Or pop, as they would say in the Midwest, right? You're drinking Perrier on the rocks. That's what you're drinking, right? With a little bit of lime, a little bit of twist. Social beverages. Some say that's even forbidden. Wine and alcohol I can understand, right? Social beverages be a bigger stringency. Therefore, getting a cup of coffee at Starbucks, hanging out with a non-Jew, can't do it. Right? But, of course, there's always a but. And that is getting a cup of coffee at Starbucks. Many authorities hold coffee houses are not a place of socializing. Not the same as a bar. Right? Because people congregate in coffee houses. They do it in small groups. Maybe doing it, for, business meeting, something. They're not there to pick up people. They're not there to just, rarely speak to strangers. So therefore, a Jew can get a coffee in a coffee house. But regularly getting alcohol in a bar is forbidden. But the problem is, again, even if I would say a coffee house is not something where you're going to socially interact too much, with others, nonetheless, we shouldn't go out regularly with non-Jews or a non-Jewish group or get coffee for the purpose of socializing. Because essentially, that's what you're doing. Is it the same? It's the same as a pub? Not necessarily. But I would seem to say that, you go to Starbucks, you could socialize also. Maybe it's not a normal place you would socialize, but socializing goes on. 100% socializing goes on. Is it the same as a pub or a bar? No, probably not. Right? Probably not. Now, also, we have to realize over here that the application of this law is going to depend on the existing social conventions. That could change with time. Right? So here, the Shulchan Aruch, the Code of Jewish Law, may not be the final word on this. They have to look at other, other books so to speak, who know of these things, right? What we call later day poskim, later day rabbinic authorities, right? There are a number of places a person could look, but again, some of these social mores could change. It's just that maybe this place, maybe a coffee house, maybe the status will change, maybe it won't. It depends. Depends on the circumstances of the day. Last thing over here is, and again, this is a huge thing over here. This is a huge thing, social beverages, which basically means that if we hold according to that, you can never go out with a non-Jew unless it's for business. So having friends with non-Jews, no offense, guys, having friends with non-Jews over here and going out and hanging out is forbidden. Totally forbidden for socializing purposes. Now, what if you're at an Noahide convention, right? Maybe it's going to be, you're going to have a night, someone's going to speak, whatever, going to have drinks, maybe the alcohol there, maybe. So maybe that'd be totally forbidden. It's a whole different thing. You're not there socializing, right? The whole thing is about teaching. It's a whole different thing, right? You're not there just to hang out, right? If I come to Ray's house to go watch football, yeah, that might be a problem, right? Even if he's serving me soda, right, in a plastic cup, right, or water, even, whatever. Doing that, being socially, active like that is forbidden. It's not something we should do. You're having classes, you're speaking to people, that's a totally different issue. That's a totally different issue. But again, some of these mores could change. Totally could change. So what's the point over here? We don't want to go regularly out with non-Jews because they have spiritual cooties. Spiritual cooties over here. We don't want to have anything to do with them because it might lead to assimilation into marriage. Last thing over here is what about moving food? Right? Transporting food. So what would we say? If it's entrusted to a non-Jew, sent from one Jew to another, there are a number of rules. One, they require at least one seal, so you make sure they don't tamper with it. Right? And that we'll discuss another time. Wine, meat, chicken, fish require 2 seals. Right? Because that's much more stringent. So if you don't have that seal, what could that render the food non-kosher when it gets to its final destination? Right? That may actually be a problem, a serious problem. There are a lot of details, and you got to go to your local Orthodox rabbi to ask. But what's the problem? The problem is I need a seal. Why do I need a seal? Tampering. Tampering will be a problem because we want to make sure, there's no quote-unquote hanky-panky going on with this food, with this meat, etc. So it's got a seal, and you see the seal hasn't been tampered with. Okay. If it's something with fish, meat, or chicken, I need a double seal to make sure nothing happens. So if John Smith, delivers it to Beryl Schwartz, he's delivering this chicken, meat, fish, whatever it is, double seal it to him. Nothing's been moved. Seal hasn't changed. No openings, no cracks, no crevices. Not a problem. Why not a problem? Because we know it hasn't been tampered with. So something that has a more serious prohibition, I need a different seal. I need 2 seals. If it's one prohibition, let's say it's something else of less of a prohibition, then I only need 1 seal, right? It depends, right? But again, there are a number of nuances, that come up over here. And that, if a person has a question, definitely they should ask their local Orthodox rabbi. So that's about social drinking, about non-Jewish cooking, bishul akum, pas akum, baked goods, chalav akum, kvinas akum, milk and cheese, and about stam yain, about wine in general. So any questions Any questions on any of that? All right, let's see here. See how fast you can type. So a lot of these things we mentioned, someone here points out, a lot of this has to do with intermarriage. And that is, probably the single biggest thing besides lack of education. They go hand in hand, right? They totally go hand in hand. I just saw a video, just so how far this goes. Someone made a video and asked, some gay people in San Francisco, who'd you side with in this last conflict between Israel and the Palestinians? So they all said 100% to go with the Palestinians, right? And Israel's a big bully and this and that. So when this person went to interview, Arabs, and asked them, what do you think about gays? Whatever, they all said they should be killed, whatever. And, they end up, what do they do with these people? If they even suspect that they're gay, they arrest them, they rape them, they do all kinds of things to them, whatever. So what this person did is he went back, to these gay people in San Francisco, and showed them the video of what he took, with the Arabs, and they were shocked. They were absolutely shocked. They couldn't believe it. They say, oh no, we don't side with them. We had no idea. They were totally, misguided. So someone interviewing this person who made the video said, how can this happen? How in the world can this happen? That someone could say such a thing and not even know the facts, right? So the person, I know the answer is a very simple answer, right? But this person said, what are you talking about? That's the way of the world, right? Plenty of people, Ray certainly knows this. I certainly know this. Sure, a lot of people know this. There are a lot of people talk a good game and they're very, very loud. And guess what? They don't know diddly squat. They don't know anything. So they figure, they figure, okay, we're going to talk and talk and talk about things we don't know about. Right? We're going to make it sound like we know something, but the reality is they don't know. They don't know, but there are a lot of people out there that talk a big game, a huge game. They don't know anything. They don't know anything, right? And people I know, they won't even let you engage in the conversation, right? They'll tell you, like somebody said to me, they said, I mentioned about life after death. They go, can you give me the short answer? Like a 15-second answer, 25-second answer. So I know if I started speaking for 3 seconds, they'd stop me. So I said, here's a link. You want to look at it? Good. If not, I'll send you the link. That was it. Are they going to give me the time of day to listen? Never. Not interested. Totally not interested. Right? They're so open-minded, they won't even engage you in conversation. They're afraid, he's going to try and brainwash me. Can't even speak about it. Oh, that's being open-minded. Right? Being open-minded until your brain falls on the floor. But they're very passionate. Some of them are very passionate about what they believe in. Show me the proof. Let's see. They're not bringing you proof. Nothing. They just talk a big game. So I saw this video earlier. It's very good. It's very good. Because it shows they don't know anything about what they're talking about. Oh, yeah, I would side with them. And Israel's a big bully, and Israel's this, and Israel's that, and blah, blah, blah. They had no idea. They changed 100% by seeing this other video. So the person said, all you have to do is show them the facts. That's all I did. I showed them the facts on the ground. Now there'll be people who don't want to hear the facts, they don't want to see the facts, whatever. At least they're a little bit intellectually honest. But he nailed them right between the eyes. Right? So yeah, this goes hand in hand. The more we have contact with non-Jews, the more it leads to assimilation into marriage. That's just the way it is. And it's not like, we're gonna hate these people. It's like, oh, sorry, I can't marry you because Judaism is really important to me, blah, blah, blah. They have no idea. They have no idea about nothing about nothing. Right? So, what do you think? You're going to grow up with them. You're going to go to school with them. You're going to go to university with them. You're going to live, you're going to work with them. You're going to say, sorry, my Judaism is very important to me. I can't marry a non-Jew. Why? Doesn't mean anything to you. Right? But the socialization, and socializing and all that, that's what it's going to lead to. 100%. That's what it's going to lead to. Yeah. Any other questions? Anyone have any general questions? All right, I guess there's no questions. I'm going to sign out. Anyone has any questions, feel free. You can shoot me an email. So otherwise, I'm going to sign out. I guess we'll continue with this next week. Anyone has any questions, again, send me an email. And everyone have a great rest of the week.